Hello and welcome to the Action Network Podcast UFC Betting Preview. I'm your host, Sean Zerillo, joined today by Billy Ward. In today's episode, we'll be looking at this weekend's UFC card, giving you our best bets, our favorite underdogs, top props, and more. And if you'd like to tail some of the bets that we discussed today, make sure to find the quick slip link in the podcast and video description, or go to actionnetwork.com/bet. Now, 11 fight card from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Prelims start early, 9 a.m. Eastern. So make sure to get those bets in on Friday night so you don't have to wake up early on Saturday morning before the card starts. Main event, Israel Adesanya, minus 160. Nasruddin Imavov, plus 135. This fight is minus 185 to go to a decision, 5-round fight. Plus 140 to end inside the distance. Billy and I both taking the underdog Imavov at about plus 140 at current numbers. He is the shorter fighter. He's at a reach discrepancy. Izzy a 5-inch reach advantage? There's an age gap between these two of about 6 years. Izzy 35, knocked down or wobbled in each of his past 4 fights, lost 3 of those 4 bouts. This is his first non-title bout in 13 fights. So title fight after title fight, facing the highest level competition in the division, taking a slight step back to Imavov. Here, Imavov taking a step up in competition relative to their previous opponents. The biggest difference when you look at their fight histories, the statistics, is the amount of time either spend at distance. Throughout his career, Izzy has spent about 85% of his octagon time at distance. He's outstruck his opponents by 1 strike per minute. Imavov has spent about 53% of his octagon time at distance, 47% grappling, and he's only outlanded his opponent by a half a strike per minute. I said that reach discrepancy exists. But Imavov is going to pressure Izzy, and he's going to force him back against the cage. He's going to pump out that jab, and I think he's going to create problems with that pressure. Izzy much better fighting on the front foot, being able to dictate with those low kicks. If you pressure him, if you take away that space, he's not quite as effective with his back up against the fence. And then on top of that, Imavov retains all of the grappling upside in this matchup as well. Izzy choked out in his last fight by Dricus du Plessis. I think mixing the striking and the grappling together is how you frustrate Adesanya, how you stay competitive in fights against them. And the biggest mismatch that there might be in skill relative from one fight or to the other in this fight is Imavov's top game and Izzy's bottom game. I think Izzy has good first layer takedown defense. He's denied about 75% of takedown attempts throughout his career. But once you put him on bottom, I think Imavov can possibly keep him there and potentially finish the fight. Izzy, when he stands up, also has a poor tendency to give his back as well. So I think Imavov could get a back take in this fight too. So full grappling upside at plus money, taking a fighter, I think maybe the more durable of the two athletes at this stage of their respective careers. And then on top of that, I think it's worth noting Imavov had cardio concerns earlier in his career, went to a different camp, moved out of Fight Factory Paris, and went over to Henry Hooft last year, and we've seen some improvements from him since switching camps and training in the United States. So Imavov on the money line, plus 140, by decision at plus 310. I would bet that down to about plus 250, and the money line I like at plus 120 or better. Billy, do you have a price target for Imavov and anything I missed in terms of my analysis for Saturday's main event?
Yeah, I was really glad you hit on the cardio angle, because that's the biggest thing that stood out to me is he's gotten more 5-round experience lately. He's looked decent to slightly above average in those situations down the stretch. And when Izzy is forced to grapple, he looks a little bit tired. I think DDP kind of laid out the blueprint for how a fighter like Imavov can win this fight. Because if you looked at the rounds where Adesanya either had to defend takedowns or work his way back up, he was noticeably slower after getting back up. He was noticeably a step behind. Where in that first round when they just struck it out, Izzy looked great. He looked sharp. He looked like his classic self. I'm not saying Imavov has the physical tools that DDP has, but in terms of technique, he might be the better pure wrestler, grappler, however you want to phrase that. And he also has the, level of kickboxing that if he can diminish Adesanya a little bit, he can win some striking exchanges. I would not pick Imavov to beat him striking if they were wearing big gloves and you weren't allowed to grapple. But can Imavov beat him striking after wearing on him for 2 minutes on the ground, forcing him to defend takedowns, giving him other things to think about? I think he can. So that's the way I'm viewing it. I'm glad we're aligned on that. The age difference obviously matters at this point. It's a heavier weight class, so we don't worry about it as much. But Izzy fights like a lighter fighter. He doesn't use a lot of strength and power. He uses reflexes and speed and timing, all those things that tend to diminish quicker, especially as you take more damage and get deeper into your career. So to answer your question more directly, finally, I'd say anywhere about plus 120 or so, I would take Imavov. I like the decision angle. The only thing that worries me is, as you pointed out, Adesanya has been rocked lately. We don't know how durable he is at this point in his career. He said he was going to take a few years off, didn't really do that, and has been pretty busy since coming back. So that worries me a little bit too. I like the bet though. Like, I'm not trying to poo-poo it too much. I just think the plus 140 or so is enough for me to get on that and let it ride.
Let's move on to our fight of the night. Michael Venom Page about plus 165 against Shara Magomedov minus 200. This fight, the same price in the goes the distance versus ends inside the distance market as the main event, minus 185 GTD, plus 140 ends ITD, but 3-round fight as opposed to a 5-round fight. I think that might be a decent price on the goes to decision. Not betting it though. I'm waiting for Page by decision of plus 300, which just popped up at FanDuel, so I'll probably end up poking that, or I'd want Page on the money line at plus 175. I'm not super eager to play that, however. If anything, I just like the decision prop as a small poke, given the fact that this is likely to be a competitive striking matchup because neither fighter is likely to grapple. If anybody's likely to grapple, it is MVP. MVP has a 6-inch reach advantage here, though, and he may have the speed advantage coming up from 170 to 185. But that said, on the other end, Shara should have a severe power advantage against a lighter, smaller opponent. And I think that power edge ultimately proves the difference on the scorecards with the judges. So, Page, a potential value trap, given the stylistic nature of this fight. I don't like him, or I should say I don't mind him by decision at plus 300. Probably staying away from the money line. Billy, I think we'd agree that Shara has more finishing upside in this fight, more dominant decision-winning upside in this fight. I think if Page wins a decision, it's likely a 29-28, or one of the rounds that he wins is probably a toss-up. I doubt he wins a clear decision here. I think Shara likelier to win a clear decision or to win by finish. You're taking Shara minus 3.5 at plus 110, and people can find your full breakdown for this fight up on actionnetwork.com.
Yeah, so that comes with a bit of a caveat. When I wrote that, you could still get Shara Bullet at minus 170, which I liked. I think I put in the article I'd take to minus 175 or something. I don't love the minus 3.5 just because even when Page looks bad, he tends to have like a round in there where he did something flashy and sway some judges. With all that said, this fight is in Saudi Arabia. Shara's last name is Magomedov. There's a chance some of these scorecards have already been filled out as we speak Friday afternoon. So, like, I don't know that the judges actually give Page rounds he wins unless they are extremely clear. I also don't like that he's coming up to middleweight. I don't hate that in and of itself, but he's came out in interviews and said he wants to go chase the 170 belt. He plans on being a welterweight. He's just doing this as a one-off thing, which means he's probably not put on the size, where he's going to be able to compete with strength. Older guys going up in a weight class, as a rule, I love if you're going to stay. But if you're doing this up and down thing, it typically doesn't work out as well. The other thing that really stood out breaking down this tape is the first 3 fights for Shara Bullet in the UFC, he was pressing the action, he was taking it 2 guys, looked great. Cool. You don't want to do that against MVP because his counter-striking is ridiculous. It's hard to hit. His footwork's all over the place. But then when he fought Armen Petrosyan, everyone remembers the double spinning back fist knockout, but it was a heavy counter-attack based approach for Shara Bullet there. He did a really good job of when Petrosyan leaped in using that lead leg kick or the lead side kick to the body. If you watch Michael Page, he's jumping forward all the time. He's going to be really open for those side kicks. And also his wide stance makes him pretty open to leg kicks, which will then slow down his movement. Those are the things that I saw that made me feel better about Shara Bullet. The last thing, this is kind of theoretical. If you had to pick one of them in a grappling match, it'd be the dude named Magomedov from Dagestan, even though we haven't seen him grapple yet. Could he put Page on his back and get a takedown here? It wouldn't shock me. And much like we were talking about with Adesanya, because Page is a similar style fighter, I don't know that Magomedov's going to dominate him on the ground or anything. Take him down once. Make him think about it. Make him carry your weight, especially as the smaller fighter. Could pay some dividends. Again, don't know that he'll do that. Don't have a ton of faith in that, which is why I'm not taking him at minus 185 and cut it off. But I think if I had to bet it now, I'm pretty confident in the -3.5, just because he should, as you pointed out, be more likely to win the clear decisions. And I think anything even remotely contested is going to go to Shara Bullet. So given the location of the fight and all those other factors, I don't hate the -3.5. Ideally, we would have got in earlier on the money line, though, if you haven't bet it yet.
Yeah, even that Petrosian fight, Shara outlanded by 13 strikes in round one and still got the round scored in his favor. I think he landed the most significant strike of the round. I think he might have wobbled Arman briefly, but Arman still outlanded him by 11 strikes, 13 strikes, and Shara was still given the round scored in his favor. I agree. It's going to be difficult for Page just to win this fight, given the fact that he has less finishing upside. He's the smaller man. And also the judges are probably going to score anything close for Shara Bullet. So, yeah, not super enthusiastic about winning this fight. Go ahead, Billy.
I was just saying, the stats were weird with the Petrosian fight, though. Like, they popped up. I just watched it back. Like a ridiculously one-sided leg kick graphic where Petrosian outlanded Shara like 30-8 or whatever. But most of those didn't really land. Like, most of Petrosian's were getting deflected or glanced, and everything Shara Bullet landed was like square, full power. So like those stats are a little bit misleading. I hate this fight for DFS for that reason, because I don't know what's going to get scored and what's not. But yeah, you said he landed the most significant strike. He landed the most like the 5 most significant strikes or something. So it's not. I looked at that and said, wow, how did he win the round before I watched it back? But he did a very good job defensively against a quality kickboxer, which he'll need to do again against MVP.
Let's move on to our favorite underdogs. We're in alignment on one of them, but you'll get to that female fighter later. I'm going to start off talking about Thomas Peterson at plus 280 against Shamil Gaziev. I think Peterson could potentially be the better wrestler in this matchup. He is 5 years younger. He's smaller, 3 inch shorter, 4 inch reach discrepancy, but he has the better cardio. And if he survives round one, if this fight extends to round 2, I like Peterson to take over in the second and third rounds. After round 1, maybe the best entry point, but if he gets a takedown in round 1, you're never going to see plus 280 again. So Thomas Peterson at plus 280 down to plus 250 or so is fine. And then the over 2.5 rounds, I take at plus 125. I would bet that at any plus money price. And then live after round 1 on Thomas Peterson as well. Also his decision prop. I think I made his decision line about 4-1, and I saw 6-1 or higher on that number. And then Mayra Bueno Silva at plus 220 against Jasmine Jasudavicius. I expected MBS to be favored in this fight, given the trajectory of both fighters. MBS coming off of a title bout, 2 fights back. JJ fighting relatively low-level competition, losses anytime she stepped up in caliber, and she's stepping up in competition here against MBS, who's the better finisher, the more dangerous fighter, the better striker. I think JJ has more wrestling upside, likelier to hold top position for extended stretches. But in a 3-round fight, MBS is the more dangerous fighter, the more dangerous striker, and I think it's a good chance of finishing the fight or winning via decision. Want to point out a few other things on MBS relative to her last fight too. Dropping down in weight here from 135 to 125, no issues on the scales on Friday. She's actually the younger fighter of the pair, 2 years younger, and I said she's faced the better competition in the past. And maybe the most important factor relative to the rest of her career, she joined Team Fighting Nerds before this fight. Maybe the hottest camp in all of MMA over the past couple of years, developing good game plans for their fighters, maximizing their strengths inside the cage. If this was a 5-round fight, I wouldn't be running it back with MBS, but in a 3-round fight, she should have enough over the first 10 minutes to win minutes and secure a decision, if not finish the fight. Billy, I know you'll get to MBS a little bit later, or you could drop in what you feel like right now. We've also got some thoughts on the Bogdangrad and Lucas Alexander fight as well. Alexander missing weight on Friday. So feel free to go any direction you want. Peterson, Mayra Bueno Silva, or Bogdangrad.
All right, I'm going to try to go in your chronological order here. I think you could round robin all of the heavyweight overs and probably come out ahead here. And we all think Rosenstrike Pavlovich is going to be a finish. It wouldn't shock me if it didn't. That would be just like a fun little sprinkle. Don't have a ton of thoughts on that, but yeah, Peterson has a wrestling base. Gaziev is a former high-level volleyball player.
Mhm.
And it's kind of yet to be seen what high-level volleyball does as a base for MMA. Open question at this point. With MBS, every Jasmine Jasudavicius fight, I assume she's like 27. And then every time I click, I was like, oh, she's like our age or a little bit older. I don't understand. Like, it seems like she just started late, I guess, because she doesn't have that many fights or that much
She did, yeah.
experience. But and then the other thing, not really super betting related, because I'll talk about how I'm going to structure it in a bit. But really weird that they're doing a female fight in Saudi Arabia. They have not done that yet. It would very much surprise me that either woman asked to go fight over there. Like, it doesn't seem like it's for them. I don't know why we're doing that. I'm a little bit worried with judging or all that stuff, but just what that's going to be like. Not to get into the politics of that, it's just a weird look. So I was surprised to see this one on the card in general. And then finally, the actual new information I have to add here. Cheating the favorite underdog a little bit because he's plus 105. I can't not bet Bogdan Grad here. It's been really weird line movement with Grad opening as a very heavy favorite and then eventually flipping to be an underdog. But if you go on Tapology or Bet MMA Picks or any of those sites, pretty much everybody seems to be on Grad, which means there's some big bettors or sharp bettors taking the Alexander side. I kind of just put all that aside and watched some tape. I really like the skill set that Grad has when he chooses to grapple. I wrote him up for both of his Contender Series fights. When he fought Tom Nolan and got knocked out, I said, he can get sucked into brawls. He shouldn't do that. He needs to grapple. Got knocked out by Nolan. Went back to the well the second time. He actually grappled. Looked great. It was a split decision win officially, but he pretty clearly won that fight watching it back. And then Alexander is not a great grappler, especially in terms of wrestling. He's got some decent jiu-jitsu, but Bogdan is much stronger, big, like more muscular, shorter dude, can get into his frames, get inside, and just beat him up on the ground. And we've seen Alexander get submitted in 2 of his 4 losses. And then he also got knocked out by Jekka Sargi, which is a bad look because those Road to the UFC guys have not done all that well in the UFC. And as you pointed out, missing weight for the second consecutive fight after not fighting for like 15 or 16 months. So I kind of question the dedication level, like what's going on with Alexander, how much he really wants to be doing this. He could absolutely knock out Grad if Grad chooses to get into that brawl. Grad has power too. It's more or less a coin flip, I think, if it's a striking fight or slight favorite to Alexander. Ton of grappling upside, more physical fighter from Grad, and you're getting slight plus money. So would not bet that. Anything with a minus on it. If you wanted to take Grad by finish, I can kind of see the angle there. For now, I'm taking the plus 105. Maybe we'll get a better line. Typically, the line goes towards the guy whose opponent misses weight. Haven't seen that yet. I don't know what's going on with this fight in the markets, so I'm just relying on my tape and evaluation of the fighters.
Yeah, DraftKings opened this fight minus 115, minus 105, which is roughly where it is currently. But the number got hit really hard right away on the Grad side, which moved Grad to about a minus 200 favorite. And then the line has steadily ticked in since January 23rd. So over the past 8 days, it's steadily ticked in to getting Grad at plus money. So to me, I read the market as fake out on Grad, slowly taking more and more capital on Alexander as the week has progressed, and the sharper side of the market clearly on Alexander, considering all the line movement. Yeah, I'm on Alexander here. I projected the line closer to minus 150, given the splits that you mentioned publicly, with people picking Grad 70 to 80% of the time in a fight that is now lined as a pick 'em with Grad. Technically, is the underdog even after he opened a minus 200. Well, kind of open to pick 'em, but then was quickly bet to a minus 200 favorite after the soft openers. So we're on opposite sides of that one there. I think I may even prefer Alexander by TKO plus 290. He's the better kickboxer. The pair 3 inches taller, 3-inch reach advantage, as Billy pointed out. Grad is the better grappler of the pair. I think this is a relatively binary fight. I know a lot of people are in the under 2.5 at about minus 110, minus 115. Ends inside the distance at about minus 120. I could not get there. Billy, any thoughts on the total or the ends inside the distance at minus 120 before we move on from this fight?
Yeah, I need a plus on either of those numbers.
Okay.
We've seen both guys go to a decision like multiple times. They both have power, but if it goes the way I think it's going to, where Grad mixes in any grappling, then it should extend a little bit. And then also Lucas Alexander's only win in the UFC was a decision. He did some damage. He dropped Steven Peterson in that fight, so you could argue it could be stopped. But I don't think he has like crazy power. Like I don't think he's the guy who's just going to start you right away. So if you could get plus money on the under 2.5, I would do it. It's just a little bit out of what I'd feel comfortable with.
Let's move on to our favorite props for Saturday's card. But before we get there, stage is set for Super Bowl 59 and many prop bets are to come. That means now is the perfect time to upgrade to an Action Pro subscription because only Action Pro subscribers get real-time quick pick alerts from experts like Super Bowl prop masters Sean Kerner and Chris Raybon, plus all the tools you need to turn a profit betting in 2025. So right now, new subscribers can get $40 off a year of Action Pro at actionnetwork.com/SB. That's actionnetwork.com/SB. $40 off for the full year. You'll be covered for the Super Bowl, UFC, March Madness, baseball, NBA, and even next college football and NFL seasons. Don't wait. Visit actionnetwork.com/SB to get $40 off your Action Pro subscription. Let's move on to our top props. I'm going to bet a fight to go the distance between Lock Dog, Vinicius Oliveira, and Said Nurmagomedov, who we actually discussed, I believe, on last week's pod. I think both of them came up independently when we talked about Bernardo Sopai, and then Said came up. His ninja choke came up in a different context. And that's basically the only way I see the fight, finishing Said via early ninja choke or guillotine. He slaps it up from the front headlock position, standing in front of you. So it's not your traditional guillotine with a guy shooting a blast double and getting it wrapped up. He just like is standing in front of you and snares it around your neck and the fight is over. It's one of the best chokes in the sport, considering it seems like every time I see him attempt it, he finishes the fight with it. But I do like that fight to go to a decision at -105. Oliveira's been knocked out 3 times, never submitted. Said seems extremely durable. I know you're on the Oliveira side of that fight. We can get to that a little bit later. I like him by decision at +410, though, considering I like the fight to go this distance. So Oliveira by decision at +410 made that line closer to +300. And the fight to go to a decision at -105 would probably bet that up to -110 or -115 between Vinicius Oliveira and Said Nurmagomedov. And then also Muhammad Naimov +165 to win inside the distance, or his fight to end inside the distance at +110. 2 inches taller, 4-inch reach advantage. He is the faster starter here, the more explosive fighter. However, Naimov does gas out after trying to finish his opponent. I think there's a chance that if he doesn't finish Ofli, he potentially gets finished himself after gassing out in round 3. So Naimov inside the distance, +165. That fight to end inside the distance at +110. Billy, you're going to talk about Damir Hadzovic against Terrence McKinney. Completely agree with your analysis of the fight. Taking Hadzovic live in the middle of round 1, after he potentially survives an early onslaught from McKinney, and then taking a shot on Hadzovic to win in round 2 at +1800. If I'm betting this fight, that's exactly how I'm betting it. Go ahead and give your analysis.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Terrence McKinney fight. Like, I could kind of stop there. He's going to kill you in the first 2 or 3 minutes, or he's going to totally fall off a cliff. It's what we always see. McKinney's like -150 for a first-round win. Like, I originally looked at this fight like, what can I get T-Rex in the first round at? You know, that's a nice, safe bet. You can't take -150 on a guy to win in the first round, even though literally all of his wins in the UFC and all but one of his pro wins have been in the first round. There's always that thought in the back of your head, like, maybe he slows it down a little bit. I know you've talked about it being kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy at this point where he's in his own head. I agree with that. I don't think Hadzovic is very good. He's fought like once in the last 2 years and hasn't won in like 4 years or something, which is not a great sign for a 38, 39-year-old. But man, if he can just hang on for 3 minutes, right? Like, it seems to just present itself if you can do that. So +1800 round 2 is just ridiculous. If you do the round 1, round 2 split, it's +850. If you weren't going to be around to bet this live, I might do that. But you really need to be like on your toes in the middle of round 1, waiting for a big moment from McKinney for the line to blow out to like +1500 live or whatever on Hadzovic. If you wait to the end of round 1, it might be too late. Like, Hadzovic might have already turned it around by then. That's the annoying part with Terrence McKinney, because if you got a guy with 5 minutes of cardio, I know when to come in on his opponent. If you got a guy with 2, 3, generously 4 minutes of cardio, it makes it harder to live bet, especially with the tape delay and stuff like that. So excited for that one. Like, the likeliest outcome is still clearly a McKinney first round finish. It's my prop squad pick. I even put in the article, I usually do a quarter unit on prop squad. I'm doing 0.1 on this one. Still win almost 2. Leave a little bit for the live bet too. So you could get some pretty big returns if it works out that way. And then the other one, you obviously talked a lot about Mayra Bueno Silva. I am not sure how I'm going to structure this. She's minus 110 on the finish only line, which seems crazy to me. Like, if I had to make this without seeing anything else, I would have made her like minus 250 maybe, somewhere in that range. Mm-hmm. Jasuda Vicious has 2 finishes in the UFC. They're both Darce chokes. Bueno Silva is way too good of a grappler for that. Jasuda Vicious is the better wrestler, but she might just wrestle herself into trouble against MBS. 4 of her 5 wins are submissions. I believe the only time she's been stopped in the UFC was the cut, which I don't want to say is a fluke, like, somebody elbowed you in the face and you started bleeding. It's not the most, like, repeatable or something you can game plan for. Is like, I'm just going to catch her perfectly with an elbow until she bleeds. And as you pointed out, that was up at 135. You would imagine she's less likely to get TKO'd or take damage against a lighter fighter. Yeah, I just thought all the lines on this were weird. I think what I'll probably do after listening to your breakdown, probably bet to win half a unit, so like 1.1, or bet to win half a unit, so like 0.55 units on the finish only, and then bet like half a unit on her money line. So, you're really only risking a half if Jasuda Vicious wins a decision. I don't know exactly. I'll have that stuff in the app later this afternoon when I settle on it, but we like MBS. It's just a matter of how is, I guess, the big takeaway here.
Yeah, I make her finish only line about minus 150. I just ran the math quick while you were talking. So minus 110 certainly seems off. Get that bet refunded if the fight goes to a decision. I think it's likely you get that one refunded, but I would be very surprised if she ends up getting finished by JJ, especially if it's in the first 2 rounds. If it's a cardio-oriented finish late in round 3, okay, I can see that path for Jasuda Vicious. But any other point in the fight, I would be pretty surprised if MBS gets finished. Just to go back to the Hadzovic fight, and you talk about McKinney. I mean, think about that McKinney-Drew Dober fight. McKinney dropped Dober twice within the first 2 minutes and then still lost at the 3-minute mark of round 1. So, yeah, that midpoint of round 1 may be the best entry point on Hadzovic. He's probably going to get dropped or taken down and held down, for the first half of the round. If he's getting held down, I probably wouldn't live bet it. If he gets knocked down and pops back up and he's still a little wobbly, but he's in the fight, I would consider live betting it at that point. If he's getting held down, doesn't have good takedown defense, doesn't have a great get-up game, old, coming off knee surgery, I wouldn't love betting him live after a takedown until after round 1. But mid-round 1, if they're striking it out, I think is the entry point. And then Hadzovic by KO at plus 850, worth a consideration as well, as opposed to betting Hadzovic round 1 and round 2 and splitting that Billy at about plus 800. I think you could just take his KO prop at about plus 800, plus 750 instead. But I think that round 2 is the best look. And it's not a fight where I'm going to bet round 2, round 3. Normally I bet, late props round 2, round 3 on fighters. If I'm betting Hadzovic here, it's just round 2. It's not round 3. If this fight gets to a round 3, I think McKinney may see scorecards for the first time in the UFC. And in terms of how I project these out, there's certainly value, quote unquote, betting the over 1.5. I'm not touching that. Not until McKinney proves that he can actually go that far. I know we've had success in the past betting Bo Nickel over 1.5 before he had ever done it. And we've got other fighters ensnared in that, but not with the Terrence McKinney fight, given the way he comes out. My best bet,
sample size. We're not.
Go ahead, Billy.
Like, Bo Nickel had 3 fights in the UFC or something?
Yeah, it was limited.
We've got a huge sample size on Terrence McKinney, including his pre-UFC career. This is not like, some guys are just outliers, right? Like, Tyreek Hill's going to have a bigger yards per reception than everybody else. You got to stop modeling that regression to the mean at a certain point. I can't tell you exactly when that point is, but it was a while ago for Terrence McKinney. It's not now.
He's been over 1.5 one time. It was his 4th career fight back in 2018. And he still finished the fight via knee bar in round 3. But yeah, the closest he's come otherwise, he was 13 seconds away in his loss to Ishmael Bonfim, 217 of round 2. Otherwise, he's only been to round 2 on two other occasions. So yeah, it's happened one time in his pro career. It hasn't happened in about 18 fights. I think at some point he is the outlier, and it's probably not worth betting against despite the plus money. However, my best bet on this card is going to be an over 1.5. And it's a fight that Billy negged a little bit earlier for saying we guarantee, or at least we all expect this one to finish. I do not expect Pavlovich and Rosenstrike to finish. I expect it to finish more than 50% of the time, but relative to the betting market, I think there is value on this heavyweight fight to go over 1.5 rounds and then potentially to go to a decision. So heavyweight fights on average go to a decision about 40% of the time. It's 41% in reality. The market here is giving you 11% on the GTD. I made it 22%. So again, it's very unlikely that this fight goes to a decision. 78% of the time, it's not going to go to a decision, in my estimation. But that is still a higher projection on it to go to a decision than the betting market is telling you at 89% unlikely. Now, heavyweight fights also go over 1.5, 57% of the time. If I make the adjustments here relative to, the GTD, this over 1.5 by my estimation should be plus 140 to plus 150. At worst, you're getting plus 180 on it. Over 1.5, plus 160 or plus 150 or better would be a bet for me. I think you see one of two fights, maybe one of three fights play out here. The first is Pavlovich blitzes, either gets knocked out on a counter or knocks Rosenstrike out early. But you got to remember, these two are training partners. They know each other's tendencies well. They know each other's power pretty well. Pavlovich also coming off of a fight against Volkov, another former training partner. It was the most tentative we've seen him in his entire career. Now, maybe that was partially due to him coming off of a knockout loss to Tom Aspinall, not wanting to get knocked out again. But regardless, he doesn't have great cardio. It's okay. He has okay cardio, probably better than I thought it would be originally, considering his round 1 finishing tendencies. But 2, unless Pavlovich engaged, this is going to be a low-paced fight because Rosenstrike is happy to stand on the outside, keep one foot on the black area of the octagon, even have both feet behind it, keep his back near the fence. If his opponent presses forward, he sidesteps one way or the other and looks to evade and land a counter hook. So Rosenstrike happy to engage in a staring contest. Pavlovich may not be as aggressive early as he has been earlier in his UFC career based on his last fight, based on the fact that these guys are former training partners. In terms of picking a side, I do show value on either fighter to win by decision, considering my value on the GTD props. I think I'd actually lean Pavlovich at plus 1,100 over Rosenstrike at 10-1. Now, these guys are former training partners. When Pavlovich left, he went to Eagles MMA to train with Khabib Nurmagomedov and team. I think there is potentially some grappling skill underneath there that we haven't seen yet. And coming off of a striking fight loss to Volkov after getting knocked out by Aspinall, this is the kind of fight you may be able to grapple and take advantage of offensively as the bigger man against Rosenstrike, who, when you take him down, he does stay down for extended periods of time, has pretty good takedown defense, but once he's on his back, he does not get up at all. So I like a slower paced fight here. I like the over 1.5 at plus 180, again, down plus 160. And then I'm poking the GTD prop at plus 490. You can take that at about 4-1 or better. Billy, any thoughts on the over 1.5 here at the plus money, a price target you'd want to jump in on? And then your best bet, you gave out Vinicius Oliveira earlier in the week at about plus 165. He's still currently about plus 140. Curious of your cutoff on him as well.
Yeah, no, a lot of thoughts. Just to clarify, I was endorsing taking the over in every single heavyweight fight. Like, I'm going to do some kind of round robin, I think, just with all three of them and see what happens. Yeah, I love your analysis. Nobody does a staring contest better than the biggie boy, Jairzinho Rosenstrike. We kind of forgive him for it. I don't think of him that way because when he decides to engage, it's very explosive and he hits pretty hard. But there's long stretches with just nothing with him. I love that. Not only did he go trade with Pavlovich, not only did he go trade with Khabib, he was a pure Greco-Roman wrestler until 12th grade and was invited to be on the Russian Olympic team but took a Sambo tournament instead of trying out for the Russian Olympic team. So like the grappling was the foundation. Like that's what he did before MMA. We haven't seen much of it because when you look like that, you kind of just hit people and watch them explode. And that's way more fun, obviously. Like if I could do that, I'd be doing it too. So I
Less
get
energy
it.
intensive too.
Yeah, but against a guy with some dangerous striking after getting beaten up for a couple fights on the feet against more technical but less powerful opponents, arguably with Aspinall, but whatever. Yeah, I mean, it would make a lot of sense. I love
And if they're former training
there.
partners, like you may go into a fight against somebody, you assume you have the grappling advantage, but you don't really know. They know who has the grappling advantage between them, right? And if anything, it's actually grown towards the Pavlovich side, since then. So at some point, I would imagine while they were sparring, they were rolling with one another, and Pavlovich knows, hey, like I probably have the grappling advantage, I have the strength advantage on the ground, the speed advantage on the feet, but the easiest path here for me may be on the ground. Like he knows it's there more likely than not. The question is whether he pursues it. So
yeah, and it's a big question, which is why I'm not trying to get cute with his props or whatever. But yeah, I love the overs in this one. I love goes to decision. Again, kind of all the heavyweight fights here. They're all. This is the only one that might not be the wrong kind of heavyweight fight, but and it might actually be the wrong kind of heavyweight fight. But as for mine, yeah, you set me up well. I took Vinicius Oliveira against Said Nurmagomedov at plus 164 earlier in the week. I guess I wouldn't say his plus 140 now is my best bet. I'd still take it down to like plus 120, plus 125. I think he's the better striker, or at least the more dynamic striker than Said, which is weird to say about a Nurmagomedov because we don't usually think of their striking. But really all he does grappling-wise is that front headlock series where he works guillotines, ninja chokes, whatever you want to call it. That usually happens because his opponent is either trying to push him against the fence or trying to wrestle with him. You can't force that at range, right? Like if I'm not touching your head, I can't get it to my armpit. I can only do that to you if you're trying to engage with that stuff. I don't think Oliveira will. I don't know that Oliveira necessarily wins a pure striking match here. I think he's better than plus 140 to win a pure striking match. And then just kind of fundamentally, and this is how I got CLV on this, is because Said's last name is Nurmagomedov, there's a certain market expectation there. And then people go, oh, wait, he's not related to Khabib. He can't grapple that well, and he doesn't train with those guys. And then the line kind of adjusts back in as people start, taking the other side of it. So I'm not saying I'm blindly betting against him, but there's a certain reality of it where his money line, especially earlier in the week, is almost always just going to be a little bit longer than it should, just due to the fact that that's his last name, despite it not really meaning anything.
Yeah, no relation to the rest of the Nurmagomedovs, no relation to Islam Makhachev or Umar or Khabib. It's a different Nurmagomedov, different fighting style, more spinning kicks, and that front choke game, but not as much like pure wrestling and control and top time. Much likelier to be a kickboxing match between these two. How do you feel about Oliveira by decision of plus 450? I mentioned that earlier. I made it closer to plus 300. I think that's a prop I'm going to end up poking. How do you feel about it?
I mean, it's hard to poke too many holes in anything at plus 450. I think that's probably a pretty good line in terms of what the true outcome is. I feel like I think Oliveira should be able to finish this fight, but obviously we've never seen Nurmagomedov get finished. I don't think he's ever even been knocked down. So that's probably a little bit overly optimistic on my side. And yeah, at plus 450, it makes a ton of sense. The biggest hang up for me, though, is something we talked about earlier. Those scorecards might already be filled in for Said Nurmagomedov. So it's got to be really clear for Oliveira to win a decision. He could still win a decision. I'm not saying they literally pre-fill these in. But if a round is 60-40 and we all think Oliveira is the 60, it's probably not going to him. So that makes it a little bit tougher.
11 fight card. We got to most of them. The only two I believe we didn't touch on, Mike Davis against Faris Ziam. This line has moved in pretty aggressively on the Ziam side, all the way down from plus 200 to plus 120. And then the Jamal Pogues, Hamdi Abdelwahab. It's basically a pick'em heavyweight fight. I know you said you like the overs in the heavyweight matchups this week. This one is minus 190 to go to a decision. Considering it's a pick'em fight, likely GTD. Do you have a preference on either Abdelwahab against Pogues? And is there any side, do you like either side of Ziam against Mike Davis?
I'm going to be honest. I would just sleep in through the first one. That's okay. You guys you don't have to watch it. It's you'll be okay. I promise. That's why I said I was just going to throw it in a round robin or whatever. I don't think I could do it on its own, but as a kicker and the chance that, Pavlovich goes over or whatever. I actually had Davis in my luck ratings though. And I was hoping the line would continue to fall. I was looking for minus 125 or so.
Same.
Still haven't got it. I might just bite the bullet at minus 140. I'm going to wait till like the earlier fights have already started though, because I'm still holding out hope we get a better price. I think Davis is the better fighter here. I also think it's very close. Both guys on 4-fight win streaks. Both have looked pretty good. Honestly, both have kind of looked better than I expected them to in recent fights, which makes it for a hard handicap because are we projecting them both upward? Or are we projecting that to continue at the same rate? A lot of questions there, but if we get the better line, I would take Davis at minus 125 or so.
Yeah, I completely agree. Given the direction of the line movement, I've been patient. I'm waiting for a better number to come into range. I do project Davis as the value side of the fight. Again, he's moved all the way down from minus 250 to minus 150. That Alexander fight we talked about earlier, I project Alexander as the favorite. I expect it to keep moving his direction. We'll see if it does. I doubt it after he missed weight. The Davis fight, I make minus 155 for Davis. It's moved all the way from minus 250 to minus 140. If it gets a little bit lower, even minus 135 probably, I'll likely jump in on the favorite there. And that'll do it for a UFC betting preview for this week's card. You can find more UFC betting content for both Billy and myself on actionnetwork.com. Remember, if you'd like to instantly tail some of the bets we discussed on today's show, go and find the quick slip link, having trouble with that one, in the podcast and via the description, or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. It's super easy. Just click on the link and it'll open up a bet slip for you to tail those bets. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app as well. Sign up for Action Pro for immediate access to expert picks and analysis. Again, that promo code for $40 off a year of Action Pro is actionnetwork.com/SB. Best of luck with all of your bets this weekend. Enjoy the violence. Thank you for listening. Don't forget about that early start time on Saturday. We'll see you back here next week.